Hello, and welcome to the FlowRy Show, a journey through life's tapestry, wisdom for every generation. On this show, we talk about where generations intertwine, sharing stories, insights, and dreams. Whether you are a seasoned sage or a curious young mind, we are all students in the grand classroom of life. Here with me today in our studio is my co-host, Mike Ryan, and I'm your host, Nicole Flowers, as we explore a tapestry woven with threads of collaboration, dreams, and lessons learned along the way. Today, we have a biotechnology pioneer, a fabulous mind and biologist at heart. Join us as we explore her remarkable journey. And our special guest is Petro Terblanche, the CEO of Afrigen Biologics. On today's show, we're going to talk about her early career inspirations, her vision for the future of biotechnology, and we're also going to delve into the depths of her experiences, challenges, and triumphs in this very dynamic field. Welcome, Petro. We're so happy to have you on the show. And you're coming all the way from South Africa, and we're just delighted to have you here.
Welcome. It's good to have you here. And as you, as Nicole stated, the classroom of life, and Petro, having done some research, you began your classroom of life on a farm. And I was very intrigued to learn, I can imagine you also have several degrees and postdoc at, I'm dyslexic as a disclosure, I tell people, because I stumble over words and stuff like that. But at the University of Petro, I mean, I live in a Pretoria, but, and in oncology and in cancer biology. And that's really, I think I picked up in doing some research. You're at the heart, even though you become more of an executive, you're a scientist. And having a curious mind of the classroom of life. And I was intrigued to learn that, when you're on a farm, my mother grew up on a farm, who's been a guest on this podcast before. You learn things differently, and you learn things early. And you drove at the age of 5 to go to school, I believe. So that talks about, not just your curiosity, but your resourcefulness at a very young age of the world around you, and how you got then took that to the intellectual. And you also, very remarkably, not only you got out of your area of growing up, you also have degrees from Harvard as well as MIT. So you obviously have a very curious mind that loves to explore. And so we're very excited. I know we don't have enough time. We'd have to be doing a podcast for 4 days straight to get into the depth of what you have accomplished. So we welcome you here. And I will be quiet and listen to you. And we'll have some questions as we go along about intergenerational is one of the key elements of our discussion, is intergenerational, workplaces. And I was also fascinated to learn that at one point you shared that the average age of your scientists that you work with at Afrigen was 34 years old. So, and I know you're only 35, but still having a generational challenge, or maybe 28. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. But
Mike, what do you want?
Yeah, it's 121. Yeah, exactly. And so we're really thrilled. We're thrilled to have you here, and I will be more ears and less mouth right now. So.
I thank you for allowing me into the classroom and to be a student of the FlowRy Show classroom, because we all learn together. Thank you. It's a privilege, and I'm greeting all our viewers and listeners from Cape Town in South Africa. The beautiful Cape Town is, for those of you who don't know, Cape Town was this year announced as the City of the Year globally. So Greetings from Cape Town. But let's talk science.
Bravo.
Absolutely. And to your point, we want to talk about the evolution of biotechnology, both its past, present, and future. And if I can just touch on it a bit in terms of your career, and to Mike's point, when you started your career, biotechnology industry was still in its fairly early stages. We don't have the robust technologies and capabilities that we're seeing today. And there were limited applications and a focus on just basic research. Since then, the industry has undergone remarkable transformation. So, Petro, what have inspired you to pursue a career in biotechnology? And how did you navigate the challenges of starting Afrigen Biologics?
So maybe let me make a first comment also for the history, and I wasn't around then. The discovery of DNA in the 1886, I think was the date, was the start of a revolutionary era in the life of the world we know today. And, you know, if people ask me about biotechnology, and before I share with you, and it goes back to my farm child years, Mike, if you ask me about biotechnology, what would you say about biotechnology? And the words that come to mind, it's in our world, it's everywhere. It's in our health, it's in our climate, it is in our clothes, it's in the care for agriculture, it's in our animal companions, it is in how we modify things, it's in how we treat metals, how we clean water, how we discover space. How do we revolutionize this world in which we live? And the power of biotechnology is such a positive power, but it requires knowledge and it requires responsibility. So as a child, if you grow up on a farm, Mike, you feel things, you eat things, you smell things, you live things. And I think in my whole mind is a curiosity is, how does it work? Why is it like this? And you know, if you have that mindset, I think science is a beautiful world. And why did I go biologically and not chemistry or physics or space science, which of course is a great and intriguing world? Is because I'm quite an animal lover, and I'm actually quite close to nature. And my dad was a farmer, and we farmed crops for food purposes. So I was very biologically orientated. And when I was given an opportunity as a young, just finishing school student, I actually studied veterinary sciences. I mean, I don't think many people know that. You've done your homework on me, Mike. I was surprised, but I actually went to university to be a vet because I wanted to care for animals. And after about 1 year, I decided I want to research. I want to know more. I want to know, not necessarily do what the vets do or do what the medical doctors do, but I want to know what they know. And as a career in science was phenomenal for me. So where I'm now today, if I go to Afrigen, what I think is essential for anyone leading and building a biotech company is to understand the science and to understand the mind of a scientist. Scientists are different people. They are incentivized differently from many other careers, and they need to know more and to understand more is something that one need to nurture, but also control, because how will we ever get a product to market and to people to cure them and to address health problems if the scientists just want to know, because they want to know more and more and more and make it better and better and better, rather than say this is good enough, let's take this to the people. And it's an interesting fine balance that we manage almost every day here in Afrigen. So let me tell you a little bit about Afrigen. It was a great privilege for me in 2016, 17, when the board of Afrigen asked, will you get involved in this company and grow it and build it? And I, at that time, said, okay, I'll join for 18 months. I'll join for 18 months, hire people, set it up, and then give it to somebody else. And it's now 8 years later. I'm still here. And And what was the difference? Yes, I was a scientist and I worked as a scientist, but I very early in my career move into management and executive management, where you more become a sponsor of research, you more become an enabler of research than a doer of research. And I really enjoy that leadership abilities. But I've always worked in established organizations where you have to make something out of something. But going into a biotech, which is a clean white sheet of paper, is making something out of nothing. And it's been an unbelievable journey for Afrigen. Biotech in Africa, there's no VC funding here. There's significant challenges around markets, challenges around funding, challenges around technology. To be part of a team that takes this little company now to be globally recognized for scientific excellence and the ability to build an mRNA platform, and which is driven by the quest for access and equity in a public health environment. And partly also because we're in Africa, and because Afrigen was established to localize the production and the manufacturing of vaccines and biological products, in our fabric is this motivation to do science and to develop technology and to share that with Africa and to prioritize diseases of the continent for development. Because many of the diseases on this continent, vaccine preventable diseases, have no vaccines. The outbreaks in 2023 and last year of infectious diseases on the continent, between 155 to 200, more than 200 outbreaks, of which the majority of those diseases have no vaccines, because they're not prioritized by large companies, because there's likely not a profit to be made. These are small outbreaks. They are public markets. They are not, the affordability is critical, because affordability is also access. You need a different kind of company to take that challenge on, and you need the soul of a scientist that wanted to make a difference to take these challenges. I think, in a nutshell, if you ask me what is Afrigen, Afrigen is a agile, nimble, knowledge-intensive little company in Africa that really wants to contribute to the health of the continent and the technology advancements of the continent.
That's amazing. Thank you for that overview. I just, strikes a chord in my brain, or of how do you, I'm coming back as an executive and someone who has to make decisions on allocation of resources for these 200 diseases. How do you go about, from a governance point of view, and you as executive leading that organization, how do you determine how those 200? Okay, we're going to focus on these diseases specifically. I'm very curious of how you go about that.
Mike, it's a very good question, because it's the fine balance between public good and developmental focus and financial sustainability. And this is a challenge of every company, but for a small biotech, particularly when you're pre-revenue earning and where you're building, we've just completed our facilities. We are GMP ready. We're heading for a good manufacturing practice license, so that we can make vaccines that meets the stringent quality standards in the world. How do you balance that? So it's interesting. I think there are a few criteria. Firstly is we have focused. We have two platforms. Broadly, we have an adjuvant platform, which is components of vaccines that enhances their immune responses, but also not have a safety impact. And we have the mRNA, which is what we call the future relevant technology platforms for multiple applications. So this is the first focus. Can we find funding and develop particular diseases and a pipeline of diseases using these platforms? And then it's the fine balance to say, in this portfolio that we're developing in the pipeline, which of the vaccines are relevant for global applications, which means that we can get a return on investment that would allow us to be financially sustainable and to invest in future R&D. And can we attract funding from funders such as CEPI and other funders to fund what we call the neglected disease portfolios. The beauty of those funds is it actually builds capacity. It builds our ability to take a product from concept right through to the clinic. So, and it's when you really reach that fine balance that I think that we create an organization that contributes and is financially sustainable. But it's not an easy balance. I think your question is very spot on. It's a fine balance to manage.
Yeah, I mean, I had a mentor who was first chairwoman, and she always wanted to be called chairman of the American Hospital Association, but she was very famous famous in the U.S. in that she would say, if we have no margin, we have no mission. And many people have quoted her over the past few decades. But again, if you can't have a way to, basically, it sounds, and I hate to use this term, what is the old analogy, rob Peter to pay Paul, but to have Peter to pay for Paul's diseases and vaccines that is global, but then comes back to the African, continent, that we're able to provide that. And that's our mission. But we don't have that margin through, whether it's grants or by, having other diseases that we're funding globally, then we're not able to do that on the local level. I think that's how I kind of look at it in my little brain.
I know, Mike, that's the reality. We live in a world where you have to earn more than you spend. So there has to be a balance sheet, and you have to have a mass balance between what you do and what you achieve. I think in the case of the African continent, the challenges are quite numerous, because it is building the capacity, it's building the capability and contribute and be financially sustainable in a market that has to be reshaped. The vaccine market in Africa is mostly public market, but it is a Gavi market. And essentially, Gavi and other suppliers have been looking after the infectious disease health of the continent through funding schemes. How now do you translate this into local capacity, where it may be in the early years demand a premium on a product, and now immediately the discussion is, can the health systems sustain that? On the other hand, if we do not build a manufacturing sector on the continent, and if we do not create industrialization and sustainable industrialization, we will remain a resource-constrained continent and a burden to ourselves and continentally. We will deprive young people from quality jobs. Africa, if you look at the demographics, 1 in 4 young people will live on this continent by 2030. It is imperative that organized companies such as an Afrigen and others create the manufacturing horizontally integrated industry and the vertically integrated industries to provide quality jobs for young people and build socioeconomic value for the continent. So all of these things are intertwined into a desirable future. And I think what's happening now on the continent, you see the headlines, is how the European Union coming together, how Team Europe, how countries like Canada coming together, China, India coming together to say, how do we build together a continent with a successful and healthy economic environment and industrialization. So Africa is the era for Africa, and we've said it so many times. 2020 was a turning point again for this continent when vaccines were not available, when vaccines were distributed in 2021, and the nations in Africa could not. We were not self-sufficient. We could not access vaccines. Right. It was just not enough, and we couldn't make our own. So I think that COVID-19 has created a new child in Africa, and it's a child which is, we have to build resilience. We have to be sufficiently sustainable for us to look after ourselves. Yeah, it's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess self-sufficient, the old analogy, not just give people a vaccine or teach them or to give them a fish. You teach them actually how to fish. And you have the infrastructure there. I mean, I work with some folks in throughout the world, including India, and I know that like infrastructure for telephones, right? And that, you know, we bypassed a generation of telephone poles in Africa, and that we're now, because we have satellites and companies that provide that, we're able to leapfrog a whole industry and to have that infrastructure. So if you don't have, you know, telephones, or you don't have internet service, you don't have, you know, the brainchild and all the vision that you have as a scientist, that you have to have the basic infrastructure, and then you have to educate the people that are locally, that are staying there and generating, you know, the breakthroughs in technology that is centric to Africa, versus, you know, giving people fishes. You're actually teaching people locally how to fish, and then become the next Nobel Prize winners, or whatever example we use on a global basis, in having breakthroughs in technology. You know, I'm an advocate, obviously, for India and Africa and developing countries, that, you know, 50 to 100 years from now, that will be the future. And but we can't have that vision unless we have the basic infrastructure of, you know, food, shelter, all those type things that are basic to human, you know, survival, beyond just general survival of, you know, childhood diseases that you don't get out of your childhood. You're not going to be educated. So.
And we need the people, we need the skills, Mike.
Right.
You know, we are, you know, technology travels on two legs. We always say,
right,
technology travels on two legs. So, and we need the people and the skills. And I think the continent has the promise of that. You mentioned telephone poles. I actually remember, when last have I seen a telephone pole? Do we still find them?
Well,
they're gone. We are all in space. We're in cyberspace.
Well, right. But I mean, I live in San Francisco. Outside my house is a telephone pole that blocks a view of the downtown. Now that's, you know, a first world issue, right? But it goes back. It goes back to, you know, 100 years ago, when we thought we were innovative and had telephone poles. Well, now it should be something in the, you know, whether it's Google or whoever, Skylink or whatever, you know, we have the technology. I also work with folks that are into the space world, and they're, you know, one of them is trying to clean up the trash, and that's another story. But as far as, you know, it's fascinating that, you know, given your background, your experience, and one of the things that we like to talk about is, how did you recruit? The average age is 34. That means you have some PhDs and scientists that are younger than that. That are your age at 21. How do you identify them? How do you nurture that? How do you set up those, you know, mentorships? How do you set up those educational systems that get the next, you know, breakthroughs in the technology at Afrigen and other companies that, you know, hopefully you have 10, 15, 20, 100 of them in the future, in the next 100 years?
So, Mike, I have a very simple rule. You hire the attitude, you train the skills, which is what we firstly look for. But let me tell you, the people journey of Afrigen is a fascinating one. In 2020, in the midst of the COVID pandemic, and before we actually was in this privileged position that we earned the contract to do the mRNA tech transfer program, global program for WHO. We were only 22 people in this company. Now, today, we are 158. 87% of our people have a tertiary education, either a diploma or a B degree, and 47% has masters or PhDs. So how is that possible? It's possible because South Africa, during all these years, and despite all the changes in the country, and despite some difficult economic times with very low economic growth, maintained a science basis. We have good university, we have good institutions. And despite the fact that we only invest 0.5% of our GDP in research and development, the country was able to leverage 10 times that amount. So if you have that ecosystem, we were able to recruit from universities, because when this program started, there was no luxury of time. We had to build, we had to fast track experience. And in my whole life, I've often said you can never fast track experience. I tell you now, 3 years later, you can. So we hired young PhDs, postdocs from universities in South Africa, and our staff, except for 1 or 2, are all local. They are proudly South African. We hired these highly qualified people, but they're inexperienced. They've never worked in a facility. They've never worked with the mRNA. They've never developed a vaccine from concept to clinical trials. They don't understand GMP. We couldn't find industrial pharmacists. The country doesn't train them, and that's the other thing.
Wow.
When we started hiring and building the horizontal value chain from how do you design a vaccine and how do you go through all the valleys of death in development to a vaccine that goes in the clinic and validate the platform. How do you do that in South Africa? It was only when we start building the skills, building this horizontal value chain that we realize this country doesn't train industrial pharmacists.
Wow.
We don't train production pharmacists. So we had to train them. So 34 is young. It tells you this is Generation Z and and millennials. So you must know this. They are fun. They are fun. Don't you dare not be alert. But they are eager. They want to learn. And they learn. So we have been privileged that organizations such as the IVI in Korea, the World Health Organization, many institutions actually, when the program was announced and we realized we're not going to get a technology transfer from the leaders in the field, we have to go greenfields, we have to develop this ourselves.
Right.
Groups reached out and said, can we train your people? We had large companies scheduling online training to train our people about mRNA, about analytics, about assay development. So our people have had 3 years of unprecedented exposure to world-class training and experience that can build this. For me, that this is a hub of biotech on the continent, and I don't want to insult anyone else, but this is absolutely beautiful. So our challenge now is, how do we turn this into products? How do we sustain this financially? How do we ensure that these young people that has achieved so much in 3 years, end to end, remains stimulated, have a real career, is financially secured, and continues to be retained by the company. My biggest nightmare, waking up 2 o'clock at night screaming, is that I lose my people.
Right.
I can build a facility again. We can make products, but you can't lose your people. So this is a case study of how you nurture young people, how you allow them to fail. We've made mistakes. We paid school fees. We allowed them to fail, and we give them the space to learn. So I think we need 10 pockets of this on the continent to move us forward.
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of work historically in India and other places. India has, 1.4 billion people. And I heard you say, I think Africa has 1.3 or 4 billion, right? Is that the total number? And one of the biggest challenges that we have in India, and I'm part of the Brotherhood. I'm not from there, but I work with them on boards and stuff like that, is the academic hierarchy that many, and there's great schools, IITs, that are all throughout India, but many come to Europe and go to the United States. And guess what? Many never go back. And so friends of mine that are venture capitalists that are from India, from Delhi or whatever, and came to the United States 30, 40 years ago, their biggest challenge is that there are no, unicorns or big companies like that in general, like there are in Silicon Valley otherwise. And why is that? Because if you're coming from poor, nothing, and you suddenly go to university and get your PhD in AI or mathematics or whatever, chemistry, and you have the opportunity to build a company and you're building it, and suddenly someone offers you $30 million, not talking about $1 billion, you're going to take it. And that's why it never happened. So what you're saying with what you're doing with Afrigen is, you're building your own, right? And you're showing these young minds, right, that you don't have to leave the continent, right? And what that means, obviously you want them to stay with you, and you don't want to have that nightmare they have this turnover. But let's say they do leave, the likelihood they may go down the street or some other place within the continent, that you're keeping that intellectual capacity within inside the continent. And that is very powerful. If again, I look at longitudinal, right? Is that you go out there and say, okay, what impact does this have? And just take an example where I am in Silicon Valley, right? There's a reason Silicon Valley. People do fail, right? They do have capital, but failure is not the objective. Failure is you do it, you get up, you go again. I mean, people don't realize that PayPal was 24 hours from going bankrupt before it sold for $1 billion, right? And I don't know if you learned this when you were at MIT and stuff like that, as far as case studies. Well, you have a remarkable case study of what this will be and the impact it will have, because every one of those 150 or so brilliant minds that you have trained and have learned and it will have breakthroughs will remain and for the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. So I applaud, what you're doing. It's a remarkable story, and I'm looking forward to continue keeping up with you.
I think I want to add something else. It's also the mindset of how do you empower people and never create learned helplessness? Give you 2 examples. We've lost two people in the last year. So remember, for me, 2 people is a lot. It's too many because we put so much into them. And actually, they're a bit like my children, which is good and bad. But both those went international. Okay. And one of them went to one of our partners, and the other one went to another university. When they came to tell me in the office, and you can see how difficult the decisions is. The mindset that I had is, this is an opportunity for collaboration. Can we support you? Both of them went into institutions where they would, one a PhD and the other one would do some postdoctoral work. I said, this is a model for collaboration. How do we support you that you continue your work at Penn State University, which is a famous university, but we collaborate. And in fact, we keep those connections, because now Afrigen suddenly is on 3 continents. Right. We only have offices in Cape Town, but we are on 3 continents. And that is, and I think it's a fine line. Again, I don't want to encourage all my people to have I created. But when people come and they've made their mind that they want to go to the UK and the other one to the US, the best we can do is to maintain the relationship and to build on it.
Yeah, the alumni network, is,
alumni network.
Yeah, will proliferate over the, years, decades ahead, and they will always remember, like I remember where I got my training, or you remember, and Nicole remembers where we get our training, and the people that we, nurtured us and helped us or whatever. You don't forget that. And it is a struggle to break the umbilical cord of the mothership and to go, to the UK or the US or wherever. But you're building a node for the future, and have people that then, always have that special part in the heart. And again, from an economic point of view, bring relationships that, okay, here's something we're doing, innovation. How can we have Afrigen involved with this? How can we bring some of our resources? And maybe I get very successful and I write a check for them in the future or something like that. So never, nurturing the network because of what you did in the embryonic stage of the science with the company going forward. So that's a beautiful thing.
It's a culture of abundance, Mike.
Yeah, very good.
Dr. Terblanche, this has been an intriguing and insightful educational conversation. You have demonstrated the human face of biotechnology, doing with it such grace, upholding human dignity. You have also demonstrated that how we go about preventing and treating diseases, improving nutrition, and extending lifespan, as you stated it quite eloquently. Biotechnology is everywhere. It's in our being. We want to thank you for coming on the show. Do you have any final comments for our viewers before we close out?
Oh, First, a thank you to both of you. It's an honor. And secondly, what shall I say to our viewers? Let's be a pioneer. You know, we've sent Pioneer 10 to Jupiter, I think, and we should do it again.
Oh, I love that. Let's be a pioneer. As we navigate the tapestry of life, remember that every chapter offers new lessons. As Dr. Terblanche shares the opportunities as well as the connections, being able to connect from one continent to another. Let's embrace the journey, cherish the moments, and continue to learn, grow, and inspire. Dr. Terblanche, thanks for coming on the show. And to our viewers, until next time, thanks for listening in. And as Dr. Terblanche says, biotechnology, it's in everything that we do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.